Before today's video, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest videos. If you want to see a case or topic covered by Paranormally Listed, then go to criminallylisted.com and fill out the questionnaire under the Suggest a Case tab. Number 3. Kuno Hoffman. Kuno Hoffman was born in 1931 in the Bavaria region of Germany. During his childhood, he suffered extreme abuse at the hands of his alcoholic father, including severe beatings and traumatic physical punishments that resulted in the loss of his speech and hearing. As an adult, Hoffman struggled with social integration and mental health. He spent around 9 years in mental health institutions, escaping them a total of 12 times. He also had a criminal record for theft and served time in prison. During his time behind bars, Hoffman developed a deep obsession with occult practices. He voraciously studied Satanism, black magic, vampirism, and necrophilia. He believed that by performing rituals with corpses and consuming blood, he could make himself good-looking and strong. From 1971 to 1972, authorities became aware of a wave of bizarre grave robberies in and around Nuremberg. Fresh graves were opened, corpses sometimes mutilated, bodies were arranged in ritualistic ways, and in many cases sexual acts and biting were reported. In one case, the corpse was beheaded and the head was never found. The pattern showed the offender was selecting recently buried bodies, returning repeatedly to the same graves, and in some accounts taking keys or otherwise obtaining access to cemetery grounds after hours. As cemeteries improved security and exhumation opportunities declined, Hoffman allegedly turned to live victims to obtain fresh blood. On May 6, 1972, a man walking noticed a man acting suspiciously in a Mercedes in Lindenberg, which is about 18 kilometers from Nuremberg. As the man approached the car, the man inside the car jumped out and sped away on a red motorcycle. When the witness looked in the car, he found a couple shot to death. They were 24-year-old Marcus Adler and his fiancée, 18-year-old Ruth Lizzie. When investigators examined the bodies, they noticed bite marks around the bullet wounds. Those murders marked a dramatic and bloody escalation from post-mortem desecration to homicide. Days later, mortuary attendant George Wormuth caught Hoffman in the act of desecrating a freshly exhumed corpse and confronted him. During the confrontation, Hoffman shot the attendant in the stomach. Hoffman then fled the cemetery. The attendant ultimately survived and provided a description to the police. The police connected the bullets from the murdered couple and the bullet from the cemetery attendant and concluded they were fired from the same gun. Between all the witnesses, a composite drawing was made. A few days later, Helmut Constant, a dock worker at the Dimmereg Transport Company, called the police. He claimed his co-worker fit the description and composite drawing. The police arrested 41-year-old Kuno Hoffman that day. When in police custody, Hoffman's bedroom was searched at his sister's house. Detectives found a check-made 7.65mm automatic pistol. After ballistic testing was done on the gun, the investigators believed that it was the gun used to kill Marcus and Lizzie, as well as shoot the cemetery attendant. Also in his bedroom, the police found several human skulls. During the police investigation, Hoffman reportedly confessed to numerous grave robberies and to the double murder. In interrogations, he described drinking blood and his ritualistic behavior. Police and prosecutors treated the acts as criminal and not purely delusional automatism. In Hoffman's case, investigators emphasized both his ritual/occult-sounding justifications and the concrete criminal actions. On August 5, 1974, Hoffman went to trial for 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. During the trial, the prosecution maintained that Hoffman was legally sound and fully accountable for his actions. However, 2 of the 3 doctors who examined Hoffman disagreed and claimed he was mentally unfit to stand trial. After some time, the courts found him sane to stand trial. The prosecution had solid evidence against Hoffman. They had the matching bullets that came from the gun found in his bedroom. The skull from one of the missing corpses was also found in his possession. He had also readily confessed to the grave desecrations and murders. At trial, using a sign language interpreter, Hoffman claimed not to be a vampire, just extremely lonely, alienated, and isolated because he could not experience a normal relationship with a woman. Ultimately, Hoffman was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1974. While awaiting transfer to federal prison, he made disturbing requests. He reportedly asked for one last sip of virgin's blood. No records can be found after the trial of Kuno Hoffman. If he is still alive, he would be 94. Number 2. Raymond Fernandez. In the annals of American true crime, the names Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck remain notorious. Dubbed the Lonely Hearts Killers, their crimes in the late 1940s captured national headlines. They were not serial killers in the sense of years-long careers of hidden violence, but their case shocked the public because of the bizarre combination of obsessive love, calculated fraud, and cold-blooded murder. Raymond Martinez Fernandez was born on December 17, 1914, in Hawaii to Spanish parents. As a child, he moved with his family to Bridgeport, Connecticut, before returning to Spain in his teen years. He eventually worked as a seaman in the Spanish Merchant Marine, traveling the world and becoming fluent in several languages. During World War II, Fernandez served with the British Armed Forces. In 1945, while working as a deckhand, he suffered a severe head injury when a steel hatch fell on him. His skull was fractured and he lost part of his frontal lobe. Later, psychiatric testimony suggested his injury might have affected his impulse control and sexual behavior, though he was fully aware of right and wrong. When Fernandez returned to the United States after the war, he was restless. He stole clothing from a ship, was caught, and served time in prison. It was behind bars he encountered a fellow inmate who introduced him to the world of voodoo and black magic. Fernandez became fascinated with the belief that rituals and charms could give him power over women, making them submissive. Though the influence of these beliefs is debated, Fernandez clearly believed he had natural ability to manipulate and dominate vulnerable women. Fernandez later admitted he genuinely believed in the power of magic over women. He kept conjure oils, powders, and charms with him after his release. Accounts say he sometimes shaved his head, claiming it was part of a ritual, and he told women he had spiritual gifts that could bring them luck or protect them. More than anything, Fernandez used the appearance of mystical power to intimidate and manipulate lonely women, making them feel he had some supernatural dominance. After his release, Fernandez began practicing and responding to ads in the Lonely Hearts columns of newspapers. These were classified ads where widows, divorcees, and single women sought romance or companionship. He perfected a routine. He would charm women with letters, propose love, sometimes promise marriage, and then visit them. Often he would sleep with them, gain their trust, and leave with money or property. For a time, Fernandez was simply a con man, but not yet a killer. That changed when he met Martha Beck. Martha Jewel Seberg Beck was born on May 6, 1920, in Milton, Florida. Her childhood was difficult. Due to a glandular problem, she became overweight very early in life. She also experienced puberty prematurely, which made her the target of cruel teasing. Later, Martha alleged that she had been sexually abused by her brother, and when she told her mother, she was beaten rather than protected. Despite these hardships, Beck showed intelligence and ambition. She trained as a nurse, later working as a supervisor at a children's hospital. Still, her life was unhappy. She had 2 short marriages, each of which ended in abandonment. She had 2 children, but struggled financially and emotionally as a single mother. In 1947, lonely and yearning for affection, Beck answered a personal ad placed by Raymond Fernandez. Their connection was immediate. When she met him, she was entranced by his charm and worldliness. For Fernandez, Beck's devotion was just as striking. Unlike other women he deceived, Beck did not recoil when she discovered his scams. Instead, she wanted to join him. Soon, Martha abandoned her children at the Salvation Army in Florida and ran off to be with Fernandez. The two became inseparable. They posed as siblings to allay suspicion, and together they devised a plan to continue Fernandez's Lonely Hearts schemes. In late 1948, Fernandez began corresponding with Janet Fay, a 66-year-old widow living in Albany, New York. Janet was deeply religious, but she was also lonely, and Fernandez convinced her he was a Catholic widower seeking a good wife. He promised her marriage, and within weeks, Janet agreed to meet in person. On January 4, 1949, Fernandez and Beck traveled to Albany, where Janet welcomed them into her home. Fernandez gave her an engagement ring, and Janet opened a joint bank account with him. But Martha quickly grew jealous. She saw Janet kiss Raymond and accused her of being a temptress. On January 5, 1949, while Janet was in her bedroom, Martha attacked. She struck Janet repeatedly on the head with a hammer. Fernandez then strangled her with a scarf. They stuffed her body into a trunk and buried it in the basement of a rented house in Westchester County. The murder was brutal, but the pair carried on as if it was just part of their scheme. They continued to seek new victims. Later, in February 1949, Fernandez wrote to Delphine Downing, a 28-year-old widow living in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Delphine lived with her 2-year-old daughter, Raynell. Delphine invited Fernandez and Beck into her home. At first, things seemed cordial, but Delphine soon grew uneasy. She knows Fernandez was evasive about his past, and Martha was acting strangely. When Delphine threatened to expose them, the couple decided she had to be silenced. On February 28, 1949, Fernandez gave Delphine sleeping pills to calm her nerves. While she was unconscious, Martha became paranoid that Delphine's daughter had seen too much. In a chilling act, Martha grabbed the toddler and drowned her in a basin of water. Later, when Delphine awoke and realized something was wrong, Fernandez shot her in the head. The pair buried the mother and child in the basement of the Downing home. But neighbors had already become suspicious. When they hadn't seen Delphine or her daughter, they called the police. On March 1, 1949, officers entered the house, found the shallow graves, and arrested Fernandez and Beck on the spot. Once in custody, Fernandez quickly confessed. He admitted killing Delphine, but he tried to minimize Martha's role. He even claimed at one point he alone had committed the crimes to protect her. Martha, however, also gave statements. She confessed to killing the child, but said she did it to spare the girl from growing up an orphan. Investigators were horrified by the lack of remorse shown by either of them. Investigators later pointed out how many victims were deeply religious or superstitious, and Fernandez exploited this. Some women may have been less willing to defy him because they thought he had occult powers. The confessions also tied them to the murder of Janet Fay in New York. Because Michigan had no death penalty, authorities extradited them to New York to face charges. The trial began in June 1949 in Bronx County, New York. From the start, it attracted massive press attention. Newspapers in the late 1940s played up the black magic heavily. Headlines called him the voodoo killer or the black magic lover. Articles often exaggerated his involvement in occult practices, portraying him almost as a sorcerer who bewitched women. In reality, it seems his knowledge of black magic was shallow, picked up in prison, and blended with his own manipulative charisma. Their appearance together in court fascinated the public. Fernandez with his slick demeanor, and Martha overweight and sullen. The prosecution focused on the murder of Janet Fay since the crime was committed in New York. Witnesses testified about the discovery of Janet's body in the rented house, as well as the couple's trail of fraud and deception. The defense tried to argue that the confessions had been coerced and that the pair suffered from mental illness. They pointed to Fernandez's wartime injury and Martha's troubled past. The defense mentioned Fernandez's head injury and his interest in voodoo as possible evidence of mental instability, but experts testified that he was fully sane. Psychiatrists concluded that while Fernandez truly believed in magic, he mainly used it as a psychological weapon. The most sensational testimony came when their own words were read aloud. Fernandez had admitted strangling Janet, while Martha admitted to striking her with a hammer. Neither expressed deep regret. Their bond to each other remained the central theme of the trial. They were willing to kill, not just for the money, but to preserve their relationship. On August 18, 1949, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder for both Fernandez and Beck. Judge Ferdinand Pecora sentenced them to death. While awaiting execution at Sing Sing prison, Fernandez and Beck continued to correspond. They remained devoted to each other, though they were kept in separate cells. Beck often wrote letters proclaiming her undying love for Fernandez. Both appealed their sentences, but the appeals were denied. Public opinion at the time strongly supported their execution. The press painted them as symbols of corruption and moral decay, warning readers about the dangers of Lonely Heart schemes. On the evening of March 8, 1951, the sentence was carried out. Raymond Fernandez was led to the electric chair first. He reportedly remained calm, declaring, quote, "I want to shout it out. I love Martha. What do the public know about love?" Unquote. Minutes later, Martha Beck was brought in. She was reportedly terrified, but remained defiant. Her final words were, quote, "My story is a love story, but only those tortured with love can understand what I mean. My death house has only strengthened my love for Raymond. Love is what made me face this last moment. Love is what I said kept me going, and here's the proof of how much I love him." Unquote. At 11:20 p.m., they were both dead, executed side by side at Sing Sing. The case of Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck endures as one of America's most infamous true crime stories. Their murders were not committed for profit alone, but with a twist of loyalty to one another. Their obsessive relationship, combined with Fernandez's manipulation and Beck's desperation for love, created a deadly combination. The Lonely Hearts Killers have since inspired numerous works of fiction and film, including The Honeymoon Killers, Deep Crimson, and Lonely Hearts. The case remains a grim reminder of how isolation, manipulation, and obsessive love can combine into something lethal. Number 1. Motive Fandey. In the history of Malaysian crime, few names resonate with the same eerie infamy as Mona Fandey. Once a pop singer, later a self-proclaimed spiritual healer, and finally one of Malaysia's most notorious murderers, her story is a grim intersection of politics, superstition, and betrayal. Mona Fandey was born Nur Masnai Ismail in 1956 in Cangar Perlis, Malaysia. Little is publicly documented about her childhood, but like many young Malaysians in the 1970s and 1980s, she was drawn to the entertainment industry. From an early age, she dreamed to be a performer. Her chance came in the 1980s when she pursued a short-lived career as a pop singer, adopting the stage name Mona Fandey. This was an nod to her husband's nickname, Fandey. She released a few songs, the most notable being Diana. Though the song received some airplay, it never catapulted her to fame. Compared to the booming career of Malaysian stars at the time, Mona's music did not stand out. Still, her ambition did not fade. When her career stalled, she shifted her focus towards something that would define her legacy in a much darker way: spiritual healing. Mona and her husband, Mohammed Noor Afandi Abdul Rahman, began presenting themselves as spiritual healers and bomos. Bomos are Malay shamans who practice traditional rituals, folk healing, and mystical services. In Malaysia, belief in supernatural forces and ritual practices has long coexisted with Islam and local traditions. People from many walks of life, including politicians, business people, and celebrities, sometimes turn to shamans to improve luck, protect themselves from enemies, or gain power. Mona and Afandi market themselves as specialists in rituals that promise wealth, success, and protection. Their clientele often consider of high-ranking and wealthy individuals. They position themselves as spiritual figures who could open doors to greater influence using ceremonies, charms, and alleged sacred objects. One of the clients who sought their services was Mazlan Idris, a young and ambitious politician from the United Malays National Organization. UMNO was the ruling party of Malaysia at the time. Born in 1960, Mazlan was the assemblyman for the state of Pahang. He was eager to climb higher in politics and look for ways to increase his charisma and perceived invincibility. In the early 1990s, he was introduced to Mona and Fandey, who promised him extraordinary results. They claimed they could provide him with a talisman, a cane, and a songkok, allegedly once belonging to Sukarno, Indonesia's first president. A songkok is a traditional Malay cap. According to them, these objects would make Mazlan invincible and secure his political future. The price, however, was steep: 2.5 million Malaysian ringgit, which is about $1 million US at the time. Mazlan agreed. He paid them with money, luxury cars, and even gave them partial payments by giving them properties he owned. By mid-1993, he had already handed over more than 500,000 ringgit and 10 land titles. On July 2, 1993, Mazlan visited Mona's house in Pahang for what he was told would be his final cleansing ritual. He was instructed to bring $300,000 in cash as part of the payment. That night, Mona, Afandi, and their assistant, Yermi Hassan, prepared the setting. They dug a large hole in a storeroom near their house, explaining to Yermi that was to be used for a, quote, ritual cleansing, unquote. When Mazlan arrived, the ritual began. He was instructed to lie on the floor, close his eyes, and wait for, quote, money to fall from the sky, unquote. When he complied, blindfolded and vulnerable, Jeremy struck him with a parang, which is a type of machete, nearly decapitating him. Mazlan was then dismembered into 18 pieces. His remains were buried in the hole the trio had dug earlier and covered with a layer of cement. For a while, Mona and Fandey believed they had gotten away with it. They spent Mazlan's money freely, buying luxury cars and indulging in wealth. But Mazlan's sudden disappearance raised suspicion. He was an active politician, so his absence was quickly noticed. He missed important meetings and public appearances, which was highly unusual for someone in his position. His friends, political colleagues, and family members grew suspicious and alerted the police that he had vanished without explanation. The police immediately opened a missing persons investigation. Tracing Mazlan's movements, investigators discovered they had been last seen with Mona Fandey and her husband. Witnesses confirmed that Maslan was known to consult them for their spiritual rituals. This connection made them prime suspect within days of his disappearance. When questioned, Mona and Fandey denied knowledge of Maslan's whereabouts. However, their stories were inconsistent. The police then turned their focus on Yermi Hassan, their 31-year-old assistant. Under interrogation, Yermi eventually confessed. He revealed that he had been ordered to kill Maslan by striking him with a parang during the ritual. The breakthrough came when Yermi, under questioning, confessed, then led the investigators to the burial sites. Police excavated the storeroom area where Yermi indicated. They found Maslan's 18 body parts buried in a hole that had been partially filled with cement. The remains were identified as Maslan through a forensic examination. The discovery turned the case from a missing persons investigation into a murder inquiry. With Maslan's remains recovered and Yermi's confession in hand, police arrested all three suspects in July 1993. During their arrest, it was reported that Mona and Fandey did not appear panicked. In fact, Mona was said to be oddly calm, as though she believed she could still manipulate the outcome. Authorities seized luxury items and vehicles that Maslan had given to Mona and Fandey as part of the ritual payment. The financial trail further incriminated them. News of the arrest and the grisly details spread quickly in Malaysia. The combination of black magic, politics, and ritual murder shocked the public. The trial of Mona Fandey and her husband Fandey and their assistant Yermi began in 1995 and drew nationwide and international attention. It became one of the most sensational trials in Malaysian history. What made the trial particularly memorable was Mona's demeanor. Instead of displaying remorse or fear, she often appeared calm, smiling, and even cheerful. She dressed in colorful, expensive clothes and waved at photographers and seemed to enjoy the attention. At one point she told reporters, quote, "Looks like I have fans," unquote. Her composure was interpreted in many ways. Some saw her as eerily confident, while others viewed it as arrogance or psychological detachment. The evidence against the trio was overwhelming. Yermi's confession, along with the recovered remains and financial trail, established their guilt. Malaysia at the time did not use juries for such cases. The decision rested with the judge. On February 9, 1995, after months of proceedings, the court found all three defendants guilty of murder. Their sentence was death by hanging. The case went through the appeals process, first to the Court of Appeals, then to the Federal Court of Malaysia. In 2001, the federal court dismissed their appeals, confirming the death sentences. Mona, Fandey, and Yermi were transferred to Kajang Prison in Selangor to await execution. On November 2, 2001, the three were executed by hanging. Even at the end, Mona showed no fear, leaving behind the aura of mystery that added to her legend. Mona's last words, spoken with her charismatic composure, were reported as, quote, "I will never die," unquote. The Mona Fandey case left a lasting mark on Malaysia. It combined elements that made it unforgettable: politics, superstition, ritualistic murder, and Mona's unsettling behavior in the spotlight. Mona's unusual behavior, like smiling, posing, and even seeming to relish her notoriety, fueled widespread fascination. She became a figure of urban legend, with her final words often repeated in conversations about life after death and superstition. The case inspired multiple cultural works. A stage play in Malaysia dramatized her story. In 2007, the film Dukan was loosely based on Mona. The film was produced, but its release was delayed for over a decade due to its sensitive subject matter. It was finally released in 2018 and sparked renewed discussion about the case. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. If you did find it interesting, please make sure you subscribe. We'll have a new video about the paranormal every week. If you just discovered this channel, please make sure you check out our other channel, Criminally Listed. We have over 325 videos featuring bizarre but true crime stories. You can find it at youtube.com/criminallylisted. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.